There's a very specific moment right before a bad decision becomes your last decision. It's that tiny voice in your head that says, "Hey, maybe don't do this." And then there's the louder voice, the one that says, "Relax, I've got this." This video is about the second voice, the one that convinced 10 people that physics was optional, that warning labels were just suggestions, and that confidence could somehow override reality. These are not accidents. These are fully committed, well-executed bad ideas with consequences that arrived immediately and stayed permanently. So pay attention, because somewhere in here, there's a decision that looks uncomfortably familiar. 1. The drive-through cowboy. It's 2 a.m. The drive-through is glowing like a neon confession booth for bad decisions, and one very drunk man has just decided to upgrade his night from regrettable to historical. His mission? Ride a horse through a fast food drive-through and order a cheeseburger like it's 1873. Now, in theory, this is already a bad idea. But the real problem wasn't the alcohol. It was the horse, because instead of some battle-hardened police stallion trained to handle chaos, he chose a quiet farm horse, a gentle, emotionally fragile creature whose life experience peaked at slightly loud squirrel. And now it's standing in a concrete tunnel, surrounded by engines, lights, and the distant hum of humanity losing its mind. From the horse's perspective, this isn't a drive-through, this is hell. The animal is already vibrating with panic, one unexpected sound away from complete psychological collapse. And then it happens, the speaker. If you've ever used a drive-through, you know that sound, that violent burst of static followed by a disembodied voice demanding your order like it's summoning you. To a human, it's annoying. To a terrified prey animal, it's a demon. The horse explodes, full panic. It rears up violently, trying to escape a threat it doesn't understand. And our cowboy? He's not riding anymore. He's being launched, backward, drunk, completely unprepared for the laws of gravity to suddenly get involved. Now here's the part nobody thinks about. Drive-throughs don't trust drivers. That's why they install massive steel bollards filled with concrete. They're designed to stop cars, which means they are exceptionally good at stopping skulls. He never had a chance. 1 second, he's midair, probably still thinking this is hilarious, and the next, the joke ends. Immediately. The horse runs, the drive-through continues, and the only thing left behind is the realization that maybe, just maybe, fast food was not meant to be an equestrian sport. 2. The human spin cycle. There is a very specific kind of confidence that only appears after midnight, when alcohol has successfully uninstalled your brain's ability to understand consequences. That's exactly where this story begins. 2 guys, drunk, wandering through an abandoned industrial complex like it's a theme park designed by poor decisions. They find a door, unlocked, which, in their minds, doesn't mean restricted access. It means adventure. Inside, the place is dead silent. Massive machines, concrete floors, that eerie, empty feeling that should trigger survival instincts, but doesn't. Because survival instincts require a functioning brain, and theirs are currently on airplane mode. Then they find it, the machine. A giant industrial laundry centrifuge. Now, for context, this is not your washing machine at home. This thing is built to rip water out of hundreds of pounds of fabric by spinning at speeds that turn gravity into a suggestion. It's basically a training simulator for astronauts, if astronauts were towels. But they don't see that. They see a ride, a big metal drum, human-sized, with buttons, which is basically the holy trinity of bad ideas. And then someone says it, the sentence that has ended more lives than bad luck ever could. Bro, what if I get inside? Now, at this moment, there is still time. Time to stop. Time to think. Time to not climb into a machine designed to simulate extreme physics. But instead, he climbs in, laughing. Like this is content. Like this is a story he's going to tell later. His friend, standing outside, with all the technical knowledge of a confused houseplant, pressing buttons, randomly. Because that's what you do with industrial machinery, right? You guess. The machine responds, a low, heavy hum. Then, clank. The door locks. That sound? That was the last warning. Missed completely. And then the drum starts moving. Slow at first. Just enough to feel exciting. Just enough to make it seem like a great idea. And then it accelerates. Fast. Faster. Way faster. Because this machine doesn't have a fun mode. It has one setting. Maximum efficiency. Inside, the ride ends instantly. Because here's the reality. The human body is not built for sustained high G-force. Your organs? They're not bolted down. They float. They shift. They fail. The force pins him against the steel wall like gravity has suddenly multiplied. Breathing becomes impossible. Circulation collapses. Everything inside him starts losing the argument against physics. Outside, his friend finally realizes something is wrong. He looks for a stop button. He finds one. He hits it. But here's the problem with machines like this. They don't stop on command. They slow down, eventually. And sometimes, eventually is too late. By the time the spinning ends, so does everything else. What started as boredom became a one-person experiment in what happens when you treat industrial equipment like a carnival ride. And the result? A lesson written in steel, speed, and the universal truth that if a machine is powerful enough to wring water out of fabric at violent speeds, it can absolutely do worse to you. 3. The one-wheel ego test. There's a difference between skill and the need to prove you have it. One makes you better. The other gets you killed. Our next contestant didn't just ride a unicycle. He identified as it. One wheel, no stability, all ego. To him, balance wasn't physics, it was personality. And personality needed an audience. So he gathered his friends, dragged them to the base of a towering coastal cliff, and told them to hit record. Because what's the point of risking your life if nobody's there to validate it? Now let's be clear about something. A bicycle has two wheels, 2 points of contact, a baseline of stability. A unicycle has exactly one, which means every second you're on it, you are actively negotiating with gravity. On flat ground, that's impressive. On the edge of a cliff, that's a formal invitation to disappear. But in his mind, this wasn't dangerous. This was legendary. He hauled his unicycle to the very top, right to the lip of the cliff. No fence, no barrier, just loose dirt, wind, and a drop that does not forgive mistakes. Hundreds of feet down, the ocean crashed against the rocks like applause waiting to happen. He mounted the wheel, balanced, perfect. His friends below? Tiny figures, cameras up. This was it. He started riding, back and forth, inches from the edge. Every turn tighter than the last. Every movement louder than the warning signs his brain was ignoring. Because here's what he forgot. The edge of a cliff is not solid. It's not stable. It's a slow-motion landslide waiting for a volunteer. Loose gravel, crumbling stone, tiny shifting particles that have zero loyalty to your balance. And then it happens. Not a big mistake, not a dramatic slip, just a pebble, about the size of a breath mint. His wheel rolls over it. On a bike, nothing. On a unicycle, on a cliff, that pebble becomes a decision. The tire loses grip, just slightly, but slightly is enough, because there is no backup wheel, no frame, no correction, just you and gravity choosing a direction. The wheel shoots sideways, instantly, and when you fall from a unicycle, you don't stumble, you commit, fully. Unfortunately, the only direction available is down. No time to react, no ledge to grab, no second chance to rethink the idea. He tips forward and disappears. Just like that. The performance ends. The camera keeps rolling. And the most ironic part? The unicycle falls the other way, back onto the grass. Safe, untouched, perfectly fine. Because in the end, the most unstable thing on that cliff was never the wheel. It was the guy riding it. 4. The tractor ego war. There are arguments, and then there are arguments that end with heavy machinery. This was the second kind. Two farmers, one dirt field, and a disagreement so pointless it somehow required diesel engines to resolve. The topic? Which tractor was stronger? Now, a normal person might settle this by, I don't know, reading specifications, horsepower, torque, actual data. But that would require humility, and humility was not invited to this conversation. Instead, they chose science the traditional way. Hook the machines together and see who wins. So they chained the rear ends of both tractors, engine to engine, steel to steel. A setup that, to anyone with even a basic understanding of physics, screams, "This is about to go very wrong." But to them, this was a duel. An agricultural showdown. Man versus man, machine versus machine, ego versus reality. Now here's the critical part they didn't understand. Tractors are designed to pull forward. Low center of gravity, massive rear wheels, controlled horizontal force. But when you lock two of them together, and neither side moves, that force doesn't disappear. It redirects, upward. Which means you're not pulling anymore. You're rotating, violently. They fire up the engines. The field fills with the sound of overworked diesel and bad decisions. One of them, older, louder, and significantly more confident than necessary, slams the throttle. The tires bite into the dirt, deep, aggressive. For a split second, nothing happens. And in that split second, he thinks he's winning, that this is proof that his machine, his instincts, his entire personality are correct. Then the physics kicks in. The rear axle becomes a pivot point. The torque has nowhere else to go, and the front of the tractor lifts. At first, just a little. Enough to notice. Not enough to stop, because stopping would mean admitting something's wrong. And that's not happening. He pushes harder, more throttle, more power, which only makes it worse. The tractor rises higher. Now it's obvious. Now it's dangerous. Now anyone watching would say, "Let go." But ego doesn't let go. Ego doubles down. The machine reaches vertical, a full standing position. For one beautiful, completely avoidable moment, he is riding a 2-ton monument to bad decisions, straight up into the sky. And then it flips, backward, fast, heavy, final. There's no recovery, no reaction time, no second attempt. Just thousands of pounds of steel, coming down exactly where he's sitting. The engine cuts, the field goes quiet, and the argument is over, decisively. Because in the end, he did prove something, just not what he intended. He proved that when you challenge physics, it doesn't argue back, it just wins. 5. The shortcut that turned into a volcano. There's a universal rule in every workplace. The longer the official safety procedure is, the more likely someone will try to skip it. Because in the human brain, there's always that little voice saying, "Yeah, but I can do it faster." And faster is usually where things go wrong. Meet our next contestant, a refinery worker, experienced, confident, and completely done with doing things the long way. His job that day? Clear a blockage in a pipe carrying molten sulfur. Now, if you don't know what that is, let's fix that real quick. Molten sulfur is not warm. It's not a bit hot. It's liquid at around 115 to 120 degrees Celsius, thick, sticky, and very, very good at holding heat. Think of it like industrial lava with commitment issues. And the official protocol to deal with a clogged sulfur line? Long. Annoyingly long. Shut down the system, cool the pipe, depressurize, disassemble, clear safely. About 40 steps. 40. To him, that wasn't safety, that was bureaucracy. And bureaucracy is just a challenge with paperwork. So instead of doing all that, he decided to speed things up. His plan? Simple. Find the blockage and burn it out from the inside using a blowtorch. Now let's pause, because this is the moment where reality taps you on the shoulder and says, "Are you sure about this?" You have a sealed pipe, filled with hot, pressurized material, possibly gas pockets, and your solution is to introduce fire from the outside without releasing pressure. That's not maintenance. That's building a bomb with extra steps. But in his mind, this wasn't dangerous. This was efficient. He positioned himself beside the pipe, lit the torch, a clean blue flame, focused, precise, professional looking enough to feel correct. He applied heat to the metal surface, waiting, confident, because in his head, he's done this kind of thing before. He knows what he's doing, except this time, the pipe isn't just blocked, it's sealed. Pressure building quietly inside, heat increasing, gases expanding. And steel only holds until it doesn't. There's no warning alarm, no countdown, no dramatic music, just a moment where everything reaches its limit. And then, the pipe ruptures, violently, explosively. The internal pressure releases all at once, and the molten sulfur inside doesn't leak, it erupts, like a pressurized volcano, a high-temperature, sticky, liquid blast that hits everything in front of it, including him. There's no time to step back, no time to process what just happened, because the shortcut removed every layer of protection between him and the full force of what he was working with. The system he thought he understood responded exactly how physics said it would, just not how he expected. And the worst part? Every single step he skipped was designed specifically to prevent exactly this. 40 steps, all ignored. For what? A few minutes saved? A job done faster? A moment of convenience that turned into something final. Because in environments like that, you're not smarter than the process. The process is what's keeping you alive. And the moment you treat it like an obstacle, instead of a shield, you stop being a worker and start being a warning label. 6. The human firework experiment. There's a certain type of person who doesn't just want attention, they need it. Loud, immediate, undeniable. The kind of attention that turns a normal night into a story people have to tell later. And for this guy, the annual neighborhood celebration wasn't just a party. It was a stage, a chance to become the moment. You know the type. Not hosting, not helping, just waiting for the exact second everyone's looking somewhere else, so he can make them look back. Hard. That night, the backyard was already alive. Music, drinks, laughter, cheap lights strung across fences, a pile of fireworks sitting in the corner, quietly minding their own business, which is exactly where they should have stayed. But to him, that pile wasn't entertainment. It was opportunity. Now, most people light fireworks from a safe distance, with space, with respect, with a very healthy understanding that these things are tiny explosives. He had a different idea, a better idea. Why not make it personal? Why not turn himself into the launch platform? Because in his mind, holding a firework is impressive. Strapping multiple fireworks to your body? That's legendary. That's viral. That's the kind of thing people don't forget. And he didn't want to be forgotten. So he grabbed tape, actual tape, and started attaching fireworks across his chest. Roman candles, small rockets, anything he could secure. Each one designed to fire outward, away from him, in theory. And theory is doing a lot of work here. People around him started reacting. At first, laughter, because it looked ridiculous. Then, confusion, because it didn't look like a joke anymore. Then, concern. Real concern. Hey, don't do that. Dude, seriously. This is a bad idea. And this is the moment where everything could have stopped. Where the entire story could have ended, with embarrassment instead of disaster. But he was already too far in, because once you commit to being the center of attention, backing out feels worse than failing. So he doubled down, smiled, played it off, took a step into the open space, arms slightly out, chest forward, like some kind of discount superhero, powered entirely by poor judgment. Someone handed him a lighter, or maybe he grabbed it himself. Doesn't matter, because from this point on, there's no more control. He lights the first fuse, then another, then another. Tiny sparks begin to crawl along the lines. Fast. Too fast. Because here's the thing about fireworks. They're not designed to go off one at a time. When you bundle them together like that, they cascade. They overlap. They ignore your expectations. The first one ignites, a sharp burst, then another, then everything goes at once. Not outward, not clean, not controlled, just chaos. Explosions erupt directly across his chest, flash after flash, sound after sound. A chain reaction of small detonations happening exactly where they shouldn't. There's no performance, no dramatic pose, no time to react. Just raw, uncontrolled energy releasing in every direction, from a place it was never meant to be. The crowd doesn't cheer anymore. They scatter. Because what started as a stunt just became a situation, a real one. And in that moment, the attention he wanted so badly, he got it. Every eye locked on him, every voice shouting, every second burned into memory, just not as applause, as shock. Because there's a difference between putting on a show and becoming the warning. And he crossed that line. The second he decided the safest distance from an explosion was 0. 7. The Locked Freezer Challenge. There's a special kind of confidence that only exists right before something goes very wrong. It sounds like, relax, it's fine. It's just for a minute. I've got this. And in this case, those 3 thoughts were all it took. Now imagine this, a storage facility, industrial-sized freezers, the kind used to store meat, ice cream, or anything that needs to stay very cold. Not fridge cold, not grab-a-jacket cold. We're talking well below freezing. The kind of cold that doesn't feel dangerous at first because your body hasn't caught up yet. Our guy worked there, which is always how these stories start. Familiarity, routine, that quiet belief that I've been around this stuff long enough. I know what I'm doing. And that belief is exactly what lowers your guard. It started as a joke, or a challenge, or just boredom during a slow shift. Someone says, "Bet you wouldn't last 5 minutes in there." And suddenly, it's not about temperature anymore. It's about pride. Now, normal people hear that and say, "Yeah, obviously not, that's stupid." But he smiled. Because this wasn't a risk. This was an opportunity to prove something to himself, to coworkers, to nobody who actually mattered. So he stepped inside. The freezer door shuts behind him, heavy, solid, sealed. That deep, hollow thunk that says, you're not just inside, you're contained. At first, it's nothing. Cold air, sharp but manageable. He laughs, maybe even talks through the door. See? Easy. Because the human body is slow to panic. It gives you a window, a few minutes where everything still feels under control, where your brain hasn't fully registered what's happening. But the cold is already working, quietly, relentlessly. Skin tightens, breath gets sharper, fingers start losing sensation. Not painful yet, just off. Then time stretches. A minute feels longer, 2 minutes feel heavier, and something changes. That easy confidence starts to slip. He reaches for the door handle, pushes. Nothing. Because here's the detail he didn't think about. Some industrial freezers don't open from the inside, or require a mechanism that only works under normal conditions. Hands that are steady, muscles that respond, coordination that still exists. But now, his hands aren't steady. They're stiff, slower, colder. He tries again, harder. Still nothing. And this is the moment. The exact moment where the joke ends and reality steps in. Because cold doesn't kill fast. It kills quietly. First, dexterity goes. Fingers stop listening. Buttons become impossible. Simple movements feel complicated. Then coordination, balance shifts, Movements become clumsy, delayed. Your body isn't failing dramatically, it's just slowly stopping. He starts banging on the door, louder, faster, but sound inside a sealed freezer doesn't travel the way you think. Outside, it's just muffled noise, background, easy to miss. Inside, it's everything, echoing, desperate. Then comes the worst part, not pain, not panic, confusion. Because hypothermia doesn't just affect your body, it affects your mind. Thoughts blur, decisions slow, the urgency fades, even when it shouldn't. People in extreme cold don't always feel like they're dying. They feel tired, calm, like sitting down would help, like closing your eyes, for just a second, might fix everything. And that's the trap, because once you stop moving, your body stops fighting. And once your body stops fighting, it doesn't start again. Outside, everything continues, normal, routine, people walking by, machines running. No dramatic signal, no alarm, just a closed door, doing exactly what it was built to do, keep things cold. Inside, the challenge is over, not because he lost, but because the rules were never his to begin with. Because cold doesn't care about pride, it doesn't negotiate, it doesn't rush, it just takes, slowly, quietly, completely. 8. Elevator surfing. There's a new kind of stage in the modern world. No lights, no audience in front of you, just a camera, and the promise that if you do something stupid enough, people will watch. Millions of them, for a few seconds. And for some people, that's worth everything, even if they don't realize what everything includes. Now meet our next contestant, young, restless, living in a building tall enough to make bad ideas feel cinematic. The kind of place where every hallway looks the same, but every elevator feels like an opportunity. Because elevators move. They create motion, and motion creates content. At some point, he saw it. A video. Someone standing on top of an elevator, riding it like a platform, laughing, posting, getting attention. And in his head, that wasn't dangerous. That was doable. Because that's the illusion. You don't see the risk. You see the result. The clip, the likes, the comments. You don't see what's behind the wall or above the ceiling. But physics sees you just fine. So one night, he decides to try it. Not during the day, not when people are around. Because this isn't about safety. It's about getting the shot. He opens the elevator door, forces it, just enough to slip through, climbs up, into the space people are never meant to be, above the cabin, inside the shaft. And instantly, the world changes. It's darker, tighter, colder, metal everywhere, cables, pulleys, moving parts, all designed with one assumption: no human will be here. He positions himself on top of the elevator, phone out, recording, because if it's not recorded, it didn't happen. He crouches low, balances, waits, then presses the button, and the elevator starts to move. Slow at first, a smooth upward glide. From his perspective, it works. He's riding it, standing on top of a moving box, floating through a concrete tunnel. And for a moment, it feels incredible. Because this is the part people chase, the illusion of control, the feeling that you're doing something no one else dares to do. But here's what he didn't understand. Elevators are not empty boxes moving in free space. They operate within tight clearances, precise tolerances. There is barely enough room for the cabin itself, which means there is definitely not enough room for a person on top of it. As the elevator rises, the gap between the cabin and the structure above gets smaller, and smaller, and smaller, until there's no gap at all. There's no warning sound, no flashing light, no system that says, hey, someone's where they shouldn't be. Because the system assumes you're not there. That's the whole design. And in a fraction of a second, the space he was standing in stops being space. It becomes pressure. Solid meets solid. And anything in between? doesn't get a vote. The camera drops, still recording, still capturing. Because devices don't panic, they just document. Down below, the elevator stops, doors open, like nothing happened. Because to the system, everything worked perfectly. And that's the terrifying part. Nothing broke, nothing failed. The machine did exactly what it was designed to do. It moved, on schedule, without hesitation, without awareness. Because machines don't need to understand you to end you. All they need is for you to be in the wrong place at the exact wrong time. And that's what this was. Not a stunt, not a challenge, just a moment where the need to be seen overrode the need to stay alive. 9. The "it's not even loaded" moment. There are very few phrases in human history that age worse, faster, and more predictably than "relax, it's not even loaded." Because that sentence has never once been followed by anything good. Now meet our next contestant. Not reckless in the obvious way, not loud, not chaotic, just confident. The dangerous kind of confident. The kind that comes from familiarity, because he'd handled guns before, seen them, held them, been around them, and in his mind, that translated to understanding them, which is where the problem begins. Because firearms don't care how comfortable you are. They don't care how many times nothing happened before. They operate on one simple rule. If there's a round in the chamber, everything else is irrelevant. But that detail is easy to ignore when you think you already know the answer. It was a casual setting, friends around, conversation drifting, and at some point, a handgun enters the picture. Maybe someone brought it. Maybe it was already there. Doesn't matter. What matters is what happens next. He picks it up, naturally, like it's just another object, another prop, something to talk about, something to show. And right there, you can feel it, that shift, from awareness to performance. Because once other people are watching, you stop thinking about safety. You start thinking about how you look. He turns it in his hand, inspects it, maybe spins it slightly. And then comes the line, delivered casually, confidently, almost amused. It's not even loaded. And here's the thing, that sentence isn't a fact, it's an assumption. And assumptions are where these stories live. Because he didn't check, not properly, didn't clear the chamber, didn't verify, didn't follow the one rule that overrides everything. Treat every firearm as if it's loaded. Instead, he trusted his memory, his instinct, his comfort. And comfort is the most dangerous thing you can bring into a situation like that, because it lowers every guard you have. He raises the gun, not aggressively, not with intent, just casually, maybe pointing it across the room, maybe toward himself, maybe in a joking way. Because to him, this isn't dangerous. This is a moment, a harmless demonstration, something to laugh about. And then, he pulls the trigger. There's no hesitation, because why would there be? In his mind, nothing is going to happen. That's the whole point. That's the joke. Except, this time, something does. The sound is immediate, sharp, final. Not like in movies, not dramatic, just real. And everything changes in that single instant. The room freezes. Because there's no confusion about what just happened. No slow realization. Just a hard, undeniable shift from normal to something that can't be undone. Because guns don't misfire. They don't accidentally go off. They do exactly what they're designed to do, the moment you tell them to. And he did, without checking, without thinking, without respecting the one rule that would have stopped everything. Because this wasn't about bad luck. It was about skipping the step that matters most, verification. And that's all it takes. One skipped step, one wrong assumption, one moment of, I'm sure. Because in situations like this, being sure is not the same as being right. 10. The final frame. There's a certain kind of person who doesn't just want a photo, they want the photo. The one that makes people stop scrolling. The one that says, I was here, I did this, I'm different. And in the age of cameras in every pocket, that desire has turned ordinary moments into dangerous ones. Because when the goal is the perfect shot, everything else becomes background, including risk, including reality, including the very obvious things that are trying to warn you. Now picture this, a private airfield, late afternoon, the sky painted in soft orange light, the kind of lighting photographers dream about. Everything looks cinematic, everything feels important. Parked on the tarmac, a helicopter, sleek, powerful, alive, not flying, but not off either. Because here's the detail that matters. The engine is still running. And when a helicopter is running, nothing about it is still, especially the rotor. Now from a distance, rotor blades look slow, almost graceful, like they're slicing the air in calm, controlled circles. But that's an illusion, because what your eyes see is not what's actually happening. Those blades can spin at hundreds of rotations per minute, moving faster than your brain can properly track, which means they don't look dangerous, they look manageable. And that's the trap. Enter our final contestant, a guy who saw that helicopter and didn't see a machine. He saw a backdrop, a moment, a shot, something rare enough to be worth capturing. He steps closer, phone already in hand, because of course it is. There's no hesitation, no pause, just that quiet internal script. This is going to look insane. Someone nearby might have said something, a warning, a gesture, but warnings don't cut through ambition very well, especially when you think you're in control. He walks around the front, angles himself perfectly, gets the framing right. Helicopter behind him, sky just right, everything aligned. Now here's the critical mistake. He wants more, closer, better, more dramatic, because good isn't enough. Not when perfect is just a few steps away. So he moves forward, toward the helicopter, toward the spinning rotor, toward something he believes he understands, but absolutely does not. Now let's be clear about something. Helicopter rotor blades are not soft. They are not flexible in a forgiving way. They are rigid, heavy, engineered to cut through air with force. And at full speed, they become invisible. Not because they disappear, but because your brain can't process something moving that fast. Which means you don't see the danger. You walk straight into it. He raises his phone, adjusts the angle, takes one more step. And in that exact moment, he crosses the line. Not a visible line, not a marked boundary. Just an invisible threshold between safe and not. There's no warning, no buildup, no second chance to realize what's happening. Because when you intersect with something moving that fast, the outcome is immediate, final, absolute. The phone drops, still recording, still capturing. Because like always, the camera doesn't understand the moment. It just documents it. People nearby react. Too late. Always too late. Because speed like that doesn't give you time to react. It only gives you time to realize. And even that is generous. The helicopter doesn't stop immediately. The rotor keeps spinning because the machine is still doing its job. Unaware, unchanged. Because machines don't pause for human error. They continue, exactly as designed. And that's the point. This wasn't a malfunction. Nothing broke. Nothing failed. The system worked perfectly. It was the decision that didn't. Because in the end, he didn't die because of the helicopter. He died because he treated something powerful like it was a prop. Because he saw a machine and thought, this is for me, instead of, this is not for me. And that difference is everything. There's a line that shows up in every one of these stories. Not written, not spoken, but always there. A moment where the person thinks, I'll be fine. And every single time, That's the last wrong calculation they ever make. So here's the question. Out of all 10, which one made you stop and think, yeah, that one's different? Drop it in the comments. Defend your pick. And if your survival instinct just got a little stronger, good. That means it's still working.